Hello and welcome to Drama Recaps. Today we're going to break down the 2020 American drama, The Banker. Spoilers ahead. The film kicks off in Washington, D.C. in 1965 with Bernard Garrett ready to testify before a committee. However, the storyline quickly flashes back to 1939, in Willis, Texas, where a young Bernard is seen shining shoes outside a bank. He eavesdrops on customers talking about finances and real estate, making a mental note of what he hears. His activities catch the attention of a local policeman who warns Bernard's father, who later cautions his son about the potential dangers of spying on white people. His father admits that Bernard is talented but believes the white society will never allow him to succeed. Despite this, Bernard remains determined to become wealthy. Fast forward to 1954 in Los Angeles. Bernard, his wife Eunice, and son Bernard Jr. are on a trip to visit Eunice's uncle. The uncle advises Bernard to seek employment at Northrop, an airplane manufacturer. However, Bernard kindly declines, stating his intention to venture into real estate and become a landlord. Later, as Bernard drops his cousin Tony off at work, Tony's white friend Matt is intrigued by Bernard, thinking him wealthy because he owns a car. Tony reveals that Bernard is a property owner. In the following days, Bernard shows his wife a house in a white neighborhood that they can afford but won't be able to renovate. His wife introduces Bernard to Joe, a potential business partner. However, Bernard is put off by Joe's casual and playboy-like demeanor and leaves before discussing his business plan. Eunice urges Bernard to give Joe another chance, believing her husband's first impression of Joe was misjudged. Bernard then meets with Patrick, the owner of the affordable house, and proposes a loan of $10,000 for renovations. Patrick is impressed by Bernard's knowledge but ultimately rejects his proposition. Bernard spots a gift from Mr. Reed, a banker at Mid-City Bank, in Patrick's house. Bernard later goes to the bank hoping to meet Mr. Reed but is unable to secure a meeting. He waits outside and pitches his business idea to Mr. Reed as he leaves. Back at home, Bernard admits to his wife that he failed to convince Mr. Reed. Unexpectedly, Bernard gets a call from Patrick, who overheard his conversation with Mr. Reed and questions if his actions are ethical. Bernard, taken aback, nervously says he doesn't think so. Patrick, sounding more upbeat, agrees to Bernard's deal, commending him for his unconventional approach to business, similar to his own. To celebrate, Bernard and his wife spend the evening at a nightclub, where they run into Joe. The following day, Bernard and Tony set about refurbishing the house that Bernard has bought. When a resident challenges their presence, Bernard asserts his ownership of the building and his right to renovate until 6 p.m. Matt joins them to lend a hand with the renovations. When Bernard asks Matt if he's comfortable working for him, Matt responds that he doesn't mind as long as he gets paid in green, implying that race doesn't matter to him. Their renovation efforts are interrupted by the police, who have received a complaint alleging that Bernard is falsely claiming to be the owner. When Bernard presents documentation proving his ownership, the police advise him to treat his tenants better. One elderly tenant immediately moves out upon learning that Bernard and his family would be moving in, unable to tolerate living alongside black people. But soon, more affluent black families move in, filling up the property. Impressed by Bernard's success, Patrick proposes a 50-50 partnership to buy more rental properties. Bernard agrees, seeing an opportunity to expand faster by using Patrick as the face of the business. Together, they acquire and renovate increasingly valuable properties, aided by Matt, Tony, and Bernard's wife in handling furniture and renovations. One day, Bernard surprises his wife with a luxurious mansion that he has purchased for their family. Unfortunately, Patrick is found dead a few months later. His wife offers Bernard only a 25% stake in the properties they had jointly owned, as Bernard's name is not on any paperwork. Despite finding this unfair, Bernard accepts, as the alternative is to get nothing. He approaches Mr. Reed for help but is once again turned away. This setback prompts Bernard to seek out Joe, now a fellow real estate investor, and propose a partnership to buy the banker's building. This would compel the 12 banks housed there to reconsider any future loan rejections. Joe acknowledges Bernard's audacity but questions how they, being black, could buy properties in a white-only neighborhood. Bernard proposes using Matt as the public face of their enterprise, which leaves Matt doubtful. Meanwhile, at a cafe, a young waitress named Susie shows interest in Matt. Despite being a few years younger, she tells him she knows him from their time at Hollywood High. Matt reveals to Susie his potential new job opportunity, a partnership in real estate investment, which impresses her. Invigorated, Matt agrees to join Bernard and Joe in their venture. In preparation for his new role, Matt learns to play golf under Joe's tutelage, a skill needed to win over the bank's property owner. Meanwhile, Bernard secures a $2 million financial backing from Donald, a former client of Joe's. Over several weeks, Matt gradually improves his golf game and arithmetic skills. He also sharpens his dining etiquette and upgrades his wardrobe. When Bernard and Joe disclose their plan for Matt to encounter Charles Renault, the owner of the banker's building, at an upscale golf club, Matt succeeds in impressing Charles with his golf prowess and finalizes the building's purchase for $1.56 million. Their acquisition calls for celebration and allows them to build positive relationships with lenders, leading to more purchases of luxury homes in white-only areas. Matt and Susie eventually get married. With time, the trio becomes a force in the real estate world, even meeting the U.S. vice president who visits the banker's building. When Bernard visits his father in Texas, he receives praise for his achievements. While out with his son, Bernard notices the mainland bank, where he used to shine shoes years ago. He reveals to Joe his intention to buy the bank. Despite Joe's skepticism about managing a bank in the racially hostile environment of Texas, Bernard remains convinced they can use Matt as a front, mirroring their strategy with the banker's building. Joe acquiesces when he learns of the untapped market of black clients denied loans by banks. They successfully acquire the bank, retaining the former owner Florence with a 20% stake. They discreetly start lending to creditworthy black clients, tripling their loan volume and enabling these clients to improve their homes and grow their businesses. However, 3 months later, Florence and the bank executive discover the loans being extended to black individuals. Fearful of a bank run if this became public knowledge, they warn the trio. An anonymous complaint about a surge in risky loans prompts a scheduled inspection by the Treasury Department. To solve the impending issue, Matt proposes buying a smaller bank to spread out the loans, reducing the risk of government intervention. Although Bernard and Joe initially reject the idea, Matt insists on being treated as a partner and owner, threatening to stop aiding them otherwise. Faced with Matt's ultimatum, Bernard and Joe reluctantly agree to his plan. Matt acquires Marlin Bank, the newly purchased institution, and they promptly begin making financial adjustments to mitigate their risk. A surprise visit by a federal bank examiner puts their plan under scrutiny. In an effort to support Matt, Bernard goes to the bank, disguising his presence under the pretense of cleaning. As the examination progresses, Matt runs into trouble. Bernard and others try to guide him, but the examiner uncovers further problematic loans in their books. To solve the crisis, Bernard and Joe agree to contribute $300,000 of their own funds to pay off the bank's bad debts. However, a subsequent call from Donald, Joe's attorney, reveals that Mainland Bank had acquired $300,000 in bad debt from Marlin Bank, an act of fraud that leaves Bernard and Joe furious at Matt. Their situation worsens when representatives from the federal government suspend Mainland's banking license and the FBI arrests Bernard and Joe. A lawyer in Washington, D.C. informs them that while state banking charges are dismissed, federal charges relating to lax banking rules persist. The lawyer suggests they can turn their predicament into a political issue, possibly leading to the dismissal of the federal charges. Meanwhile, Matt faces a tough choice: accept a 50-year prison sentence or pin the blame solely on Bernard and Joe to gain freedom. After consideration, he chooses the latter, testifying in court that Bernard and Joe controlled his actions in handling loans and cash transfers. Bernard is offered immunity if he admits to benefiting from the lax rules as Matt claimed. He is torn between accepting the deal or facing potential charges if he is found to be lying in court. His wife Eunice points out that the ordeal, while distressing, has brought significant issues to light. Bernard gives a powerful testimony in court, emphasizing the ideals of equality and the challenges faced by black people in achieving the American dream. Ultimately, Bernard and Joe are sentenced to 3 years in prison, and the federal government seizes all their assets, including the 177 buildings they owned. After serving their time, Eunice laments their lack of a home. Bernard reveals that before Matt's testimony, he had instructed Matt to buy properties for him and Joe in the Bahamas using their yet-to-be-seized wealth, providing them a place to live. 3 years later, Congress passed the Fair Housing Act of 1968, finally addressing the long-standing racial discrimination in housing, validating Bernard and Joe's earlier efforts. This is the end of the movie. Let me know what you think about this movie in the comments, and subscribe to the channel so as not to miss the release of new content. Thanks for watching.